Hi, everyone. Before I begin today's episode, I just wanted to take this time and thank you all for listening. Now, some of you guys have reached out to me over the past couple of months and have asked me to start a Patreon. Although the idea is attractive, I've realized that this podcast is much greater than any monetary gain, and its main mission is to benefit the community and the world around us. So I would ask that you would instead help out your community in some way. So this can be either in the form of donations or just volunteering. And once again, thank you so much to all my listeners who have made this podcasting journey very enjoyable. Welcome, everyone. This is Imagine All the People podcast, where we learn to appreciate our experiences and cherish the bond we have as human beings. I'm your host, Daniel, and today I had the opportunity to talk to Jeremiah, who donated his kidney to a complete stranger just a year ago.
My name is Jeremiah Johnson. I was born in the suburbs of Atlanta, Georgia. Lived there for most of my early life. Went to elementary school, middle school, high school there. Went to college in Georgia. Went to graduate school in Georgia, and eventually got tired of that and moved up to New York City. I am kind of a data scientist type. I don't know if that's a formal title, but that's basically what I do. And the reason you're probably interested in talking to me today is because earlier this year, I donated a kidney to a stranger.
And can you tell me a little bit more about that experience?
Sure. So essentially, I saw a lot of things and read a lot of things that gradually convinced me that I wanted to donate a kidney. And I did not know anyone that needed a kidney. This wasn't a family member. This wasn't a friend. This was not targeted. I just knew that there were people out there who were on the kidney wait list, waiting to get a transplant, and that list is long enough and slow enough that people die every year because they don't get kidneys. And I kind of went through a process of realizing I wanted to donate. And so earlier this year, I did.
How long did it take you to make this decision?
So that's a really good question. This was very much a slow decision, and I can kind of describe how it happened. So the first time I remember thinking about this was probably either late 2017 or early 2018, I'm imagining. And I was reading a book by a guy named Alvin Roth. Now, Alvin Roth is an economist who ended up winning the Nobel Prize because he designs what's called matching markets. If you think about economics, markets are normally things where you pay money to get things you want, right?
Mm-hmm.
But in some markets, society says we can't use money. It's either impossible or it's morally repugnant. And so we have to figure out other ways to match people with things that they want. And you could think of like one market like that is spots at Harvard Medical School. Lots of people want them, but it's not really morally acceptable to just sell them, the way that lots of people want, rare baseball cards, and we just decide who gets them with money.
Yeah.
You can't do that with Harvard Medical School. So he talked about these matching markets where you have to figure out some other way to do it. And in his book that I'm reading, he talks about kidney markets. There has to be some way to assign kidneys to people who need them, because there's a lot more people who need them than there are available kidneys. And so he helped with that whole process. And as part of that, in the book, he talks about how altruistic donors or non-directed donors, people who donate without a specific recipient in mind, how they make the process a lot easier because they can kickstart kind of chains of kidney donations and basically like, what a wonderful thing to do and blah, blah, blah. And so I'm reading this and it just kind of passes through my mind, man, what a wonderful thing that is. This is a great thing that people do for the world. More people should do that. And then the thought just kind of leaves my mind. So that was the first time I thought about it. I've it's in my head, but it's more in an abstract way, like, wow, what a nice thing. The world would be better if people did that.
Mhm.
And then I'd go on and live my life. A few months after that, I don't know exactly when, but I read a story on Vox.com, if you're familiar with Vox, by Dylan Matthews. And Dylan Matthews is one of the original writers for Vox. And he did this as well. He donated a kidney to someone, and he didn't know who it was going to. He just donated because there are people out there who need them. And he wrote about it for Vox.com. He wrote about the whole process. He wrote about kidney policy because it's what they do. And he wrote about, like, here's the explainer of why kidney policy is messed up in America. And here's the process I went through. And here's why I did it. And I read that. And I was, the second time I've heard about it now. And it was kind of a little more personal this time. I was kind of like, this is somebody actually going through with it, not just in the abstract, this is a good thing, but this guy actually did it, holy crap. And that was when I started to think about it, like, is this something I could do? Because, there's nothing remarkable about Dylan other than, him being an amazing person. He's just I've met him. He's an average height, average kind of weight guy. And, he wouldn't stand out in a crowd, but he did this remarkable thing. And so it kind of brought it down to earth, like anybody could kind of do this. So I started to think about it. And then maybe a month or two after that, the thing that finally pushed me over the edge to start the process was actually just watching YouTube videos. I was on YouTube and somehow got linked down the YouTube rabbit hole to a video of a celebrity who had gotten a kidney transplant. I think it may have been, it was either Selena Gomez, because I know she's a transplant recipient, or Sarah Hyland, who is the actress from Modern Family. It was one of those two. But basically, I ended up watching this video about somebody who's received a kidney transplant and how much it meant to them. And, like, basically it saved their life. And, they're kind of crying and talking about how much, blah, blah, blah. It's very emotional. And that kind of emotional impact really drove home the human side of it, because I'd already read kind of the policy side, like the very logical argument side of, this is a good thing to do. Here's the logical step-by-step reasoning process. And here's the conclusion that you reach. And, all the numbers line up. The economists say it, the policy people say it. I had read that. I'd read an economist talk about it. But hearing the human side of it really pushed me over the edge to be like, you know what, I actually think I want to explore this. I want to try to do this. So very much a slow process. It took at least 6 months. I don't know precisely when I first had the idea. I wasn't tracking it at that time, but 6 months to a year probably.
Okay, and now did anyone else know about the decision you were making in your head? And what were your main concerns about donating a kidney?
So family and friends first, I guess. I was very, very lucky in that just about every single person that I talked to, family and friends, was very supportive. They supported me the whole way. They were obviously a little concerned at different points, because who wouldn't be? It's a major surgery. You're getting an organ cut out of your body. And there's no way to hide that fact. You can't get around that. But they were still very supportive all the same. And I had done my research, essentially. I knew a lot of the, like, what the risk factors are, exactly how much risk that is, what I should look out for. I had a lot of that down. So I was able to meet their concerns about my health. I was able to meet that pretty effectively. When you go into this, obviously, the concern is that you are having major surgery and cutting an organ out of your body for essentially no reason, from the standpoint of your own body. There's no reason that this needs to be done. Yeah. The reason is external to you, and that's a very good reason to save someone's life. But from a medical standpoint in your own body, there's no reason to do this. So that's obviously concerning. There's kind of a short-term risk of what if something happens to you during the surgery, and there's a long-term risk of, is having only one kidney going to impact the rest of your life? So I did a lot of research on those two risks, and it turns out that the risk is actually not that high. The
Mm-hmm.
risk is pretty low. I would compare it to giving birth. The risk, for instance, of dying during surgery when you give a kidney is lower than the risk of dying during childbirth. So, if you have a friend or a cousin or a wife or anyone who has ever gotten pregnant and you are excited for them, your first reaction is normally excitement, not, oh no, you're pregnant and now you might die.
Yeah.
Even though, people do die from childbirth, but it's such a rare thing that that's not your first reaction. And giving a kidney, if you are kind of a healthy person like I was, is lower risk than even, giving birth.
Mm-hmm. And now, can you talk a little bit about the overall process of getting a surgery and the healing process afterwards?
The process had a lot of stages. Um, the first thing that I had to do was basically get screened a couple times. They would ask you through some online forms, to give some health background. And there's some things, that they're going to rule out right away, like if you have certain medical conditions, if you already have really, like if you had HIV, they wouldn't let you donate, or if you had suicidal thoughts, they wouldn't let you donate, probably because I think they're very, very cautious about people like destroying their own bodies, who are feeling that kind of thing. So there's kind of a screening process. And then after you pass the first stage of screening, they go into more advanced screening where they actually look at your kidney health. And they want to see that your kidneys are healthy enough to do this. If your kidneys are not functioning the way they should, they're not going to let you donate. But I was very lucky in that I had two above average functioning kidneys. And so I was more than able to give one away. After you donate, I think you typically lose 20 to 25%, I think, of your kidney function. So, technically you're losing half of your kidney function, but your other kidney actually kind of like steps up production
Mm-hmm.
after a shock during the first week or two, and you end up getting a good chunk of it back so that, long run you're going to have about 75% of your previous kidney function. So I was lucky enough that my kidneys were above average, and so that was fine for me. They do a lot of stuff, just do you have high blood pressure? Do you have um, major heart conditions? You know, they make you talk to a lot of doctors. They make you talk to a psychiatrist to make sure that you're of sound mind, that nobody's pressuring you into this. They talk to you about your financial situation to make sure that you're going to be okay if you have to miss work for a few weeks. So there's a lot of consultations, but once you pass through all the consultations, they basically just ask you like, when would you like to donate? You can kind of pick a date if you want to. Um, I did not actually pick my own date. I gave them just a time range, because I wanted them to have flexibility to kind of choose the best match. I
Mm-hmm.
didn't know where my kidney was going, but I didn't want to say like it has to be on this date. So I gave them like a period of like 6 weeks or something like that, where, anytime during these 6 weeks is going to be fine. And, just make the best possible match that you can make. And they came back with June 25th. So it was June 25th of this year, 2019.
Okay.
And they said, you're going to donate your kidney on June 25th. Does that sound good? And I, said, yeah. And so 4 a.m., I woke up on June 25th. It might have even been a little earlier. It might have been 3:30. I remember that I had to be at the hospital by like 5 a.m. And they tell you not to eat anything the day before. Basically, there's like, I don't remember if it's like an 18 or a 24-hour window,
Mm-hmm.
but like most major surgeries, don't eat anything beforehand. And we got there at 5 a.m. to the hospital, and they did a bunch of intake stuff, and I sat around in a room for a little while, and my surgery was scheduled at 7 a.m., first thing in the morning. So like at like 6:30 maybe, I was in my hospital gown. They'd already put in my IV, and it wasn't even like I dramatically got wheeled back into the surgery room. Like I just walked back in and kind of hopped up on the surgery table myself and just like sat there and was like, "Hey guys, you about ready?" And they were like, "No, give us a second. We got to set one more thing up." And so I just kind of sat there on the surgery table watching all the doctors and the nurses get ready. And it's very weird to like walk into an elective surgery like that because like again, like from a physical, your own body perspective, there's absolutely no reason you need to be there. You're just doing this because you think it's a good thing. But then, they knocked me out and got on with it.
And now, what emotions did you have during the process?
Um, Throughout the process, I was never really nervous or scared. Even maybe like a tiny bit, like the actual morning of, but even then, not really. I had done so much research and talked to many people throughout the process that it really got rid of a lot of any fears or nervousness. There's a lot of anticipation, like that kind of anticipatory nervousness, but I didn't really have much fear. I talked to, I got the chance to talk to Dylan Matthews and about what his process was like. So the same way I'm telling this to you, he told a lot of this type of information to me about how it was for him. And I also got the chance to talk to a few other donors. There's a guy named Josh Morrison who works for a group called Waitlist Zero. And they're, like the name says, they're trying to bring the kidney wait list down to zero. And he is also an altruistic donor who donated his kidney. And I read a bunch of medical research papers talking about, here's the outcomes that kidney patients have had compared to, a control group. And doing all that really helped alleviate the nervousness. So in that entire lead up, I felt pretty good the whole time. And in that pre-surgery mindset.
Okay, and can you walk me through the recovery process after the surgery?
The recovery process after was pretty painful for like a day or two. And then after that, it got rapidly better. Okay. When I first woke up, it was extremely painful and it really sucked. There's no way to like sugarcoat that. It sucked, especially the first 24 hours. But the next 24 hours after that also sucked, but they were like markedly better than the first 24 hours. And then the third 24-hour period was like even better than the second 24-hour period. And it was kind of like an exponential improvement. Every day was much better than the previous day. So for the first couple days, it sucked. It was painful. The main reason you have pain is that kidney surgery is almost always what they call laparoscopic these days, which means that they pump your stomach cavity, your abdominal cavity, I guess, full of gas. And they go in with very like narrow instruments and try to do the surgery that way. So rather than like cut like a giant hole in your stomach, they essentially cut a very narrow hole and then pump your stomach full of gas. And they stick like a selfie stick looking thing in your stomach and do the surgery with like the selfie stick extension, if that makes sense. And they do that because it's, the recovery rates are actually much better. But the side effect is that you have all of this gas inside of your body that just kind of stays there. And that is actually the most painful thing, not the incision itself, not like anything to do with where your kidney was missing, but the fact that there's all this gas like bloating the hell out of your stomach and pushing against everything. And so that takes a little while to dissipate. It takes a while for that gas to kind of naturally dissolve and get out of the way. But so, yeah, it was pretty painful for the first couple days, but by day 3, I was doing much better. And I took a month off of work. I probably could have been back at work within 2 weeks, to be honest, but I didn't want to push it. And my work's policy afforded me a month. So I was just like, you know what, let's just take a month. I know several people who've been back to work after 2 weeks. And so you basically feel a little weak and a little tired for 2 weeks to a month, I would say.
Okay.
You feel a little bit not like yourself for a few weeks. And those are the main recovery things I would say happened. You feel like crap and it really hurts for like 2 days.
Hmm.
And then for like 2 weeks to a month, you kind of feel just a little bit out of sorts and a little bit weak and sluggish. And then after a month, it's basically like nothing has happened. There's no pain, no sluggishness. Like you just go back to living your life as though you're a normal person.
And now this pressure from the gas, was that the only physical pain as a result of the surgery?
Um, that was basically it. I mean, I'm really trying to think if there was anything else. I never took any painkillers other than like acetaminophen when I was at home. When I was in the hospital the first couple days, they gave me a bunch of like, I don't know, I think they gave me some Dilaudid, some more serious pain meds. But like after day two, again, after those first 2 days that were kind of bad, and by that point I never had anything other than acetaminophen, just Tylenol.
Hmm.
Um, and it really was just kind of waiting for things to get better. You know, it was a little bit hard to like get up and down from like out of bed because there's like a fresh wound in your stomach.
Yeah.
And it sometimes if it would hurt to laugh a little bit because if you laugh, you're like crunching your ab muscles and like shaking your body. And so sometimes like laughing or sneezing would hurt a little bit. But mostly it was just, yeah, the gas pain. And that was 90 to 95% of it.
Okay. And now, do you have a scar as a result of the operation itself?
Yeah, I have a nice little, I have a nice little 2.5 inch scar through my belly button. They went in through the belly button basically, and it's kind of shocking how small it is. I only have one scar, and again, like just through this little 2 inch incision, they stuck in a bunch of like selfie stick operating things with like snippers at the end, and kind of did it that way. It's
Hmm.
kind of amazing that they like did a whole surgery and cut out an organ and pulled it out through this little like 2 inch incision.
And now you seem really amazed by this whole process, but did you have any second thoughts after the surgery?
No, I didn't have any second thoughts. I had covered this from just about every angle. So I never regretted it. Still don't. I'm about 4 months as of this recording, about 4 months post surgery, and very glad that I did it.
What are some common misconceptions about donating an organ? And is there any that you'd like to clear up?
Um, I've heard a lot of stuff. A lot of people just don't know very much. A lot of people think like, "Oh, that's so generous, but aren't you taking like 10 years off your lifespan or like 20 years off your life?" Um, and that's not the case at all.
Mm.
The If you are a healthy person donating a kidney, the risk to you is honestly very minimal, and you can read the research about this. I got a lot of my information through some of the articles Dylan Matthews wrote for Vox, but essentially, I already talked a little bit about the long term, or I'm sorry, I already talked a little bit about the short term risk that, the risk of actually like dying in surgery is extremely low. They've got this down to a science. There are thousands of these a year. And like, I don't think that anybody has died in quite a while.
Okay.
The risks that I've seen it's like 3 in 10,000 people. But if you have like low blood pressure, it's like 1 in 10,000 people will die during surgery. And that's lower than the risk of dying during childbirth. But the longer term risk is that what if having only one kidney just over the course of your lifetime makes you less healthy? And so they've measured this, and there are a few risks. You have like an increased risk of kidney failure yourself if you donate a kidney. But the important thing to know is that it's still less than 1% chance. Like kidney donors by their nature are healthier people than average because you have to be pretty healthy to be selected, right?
Hmm.
So kidney donors, were they not to donate, would have something like a 0.3% chance to develop kidney failure at some point in their life. Now, after they donate, they have about a 0.9% chance to develop kidney failure. So on the one hand, you could say, oh, your risk has tripled for kidney failure. And that's true, but it's still less than 1% overall. We're still talking about kind of like very small numbers. And that's really just about the only major downside health-wise. Like when people say, oh, you're cutting years off of your life, there's not actually any evidence to support that. Kidney donors lead just as healthy lives as anyone else. So that's one major misconception is just, I don't think people are aware specifically for kidney donation, how safe the procedure is and how little impact it honestly has on your life afterwards.
And what are some incentives for organ donors to donate their organs? Or if there aren't any, would you say that there should be some incentives?
Um, well, none, I guess I would say. It's illegal to compensate people for their kidney donation. And that's true in just about every single country of the world, that you cannot pay someone to donate a kidney.
Mm-hmm.
The one country it's not true is Iran. In Iran, you can pay for kidneys. And as a result, I think Iran's kidney crisis is a lot better than most countries. There's a crisis worldwide where there are a lot of people on the kidney waiting list in just about every country, and basically nowhere are there enough kidneys to go around. So you have people, tens of thousands of people dying every year because they're on the kidney wait list and they can't get a kidney. But so despite that, as of right now, compensating people for kidney donation is illegal. So, I was able to get a few things through my work's kind of medical paid leave program, but that
Mm-hmm.
that medical paid leave program is available no matter what kind of surgery it is. It's like if I had to have a back surgery or whatever, I would have been able to take a month off and kind of had paid leave. I was very lucky in that my job provides for that. So I guess you could say I kind of got a month off of work, but there was nothing monetarily that anyone compensated me for.
Mm-hmm. And now with Iran giving incentives to donate kidneys, would you say that this is an exploitation on the poor?
So this is a really interesting ethical question, right? Because there's a couple things to consider here. The first thing is that nobody wants a situation where like you have to, you can't make rent, so you're forced to sell like a part of your body to like make rent or to like survive.
Mm-hmm.
That's not something I think anybody's advocating for. But what we have to look at is the situation we're in now is a situation where we do have literally thousands of people, tens of thousands of people dying every year because we don't have enough kidneys for them. And that also is a tragedy. So we've kind of got these potential tragic outcomes on both sides of the equation, no matter what we do. And it's like one of those ethical dilemmas you might have in a moral philosophy class. Which one of these repugnant outcomes is of the lesser evil, so to speak. I think that this is just my personal opinion. I think we probably could design a system for compensating people to donate kidneys that would not be exploitative, that would be ethical, and that would basically be a good thing. Because, I'm looking at not just the potential exploitation on one side, but the amount of lives saved on the other side. If we were to pay people $40,000 or $50,000, say, to donate a kidney, and that incentivized, 10,000 extra people a year to donate, and that saved 10,000 lives per year. Would I trade those 10,000 lives for kind of a little bit of ethical queasiness about exploitation? I'm that's probably a trade I would make. So it's an interesting question. I know that this is something that that a lot of people feel strongly about, and so I also think there are ways that you can kind of try to split the difference a little bit. Some of the advocacy groups that I've talked to talk about wanting to not pay people outright, but remove disincentives a little bit. Like they advocate that anybody who donates a kidney should have all their travel costs and their child care costs and whatever paid for by the federal government.
Hmm.
Because for a lot of people, it actually costs money to donate a kidney. They have to pay to travel to where they're going. They have to pay people to watch their kids. They're going to be out of work for 2 to 4 weeks. So a lot of people actually end up losing salary. So one thing that could be done is that we could just reimburse people for childcare, reimburse people for lost wages and things like that. And that's not outright, giving them a cash sum, but it's making sure that they don't lose money. So that's one thing you could do. Other people just think you should straight up pay for kidneys because it would, save people's lives. And, like I said, that's a tricky question that I would probably support in the end. I think there are ways you could do it more ethically. But yeah, very interesting question.
Okay, and do you really believe that there's a difference between paying for someone's childcare as opposed to just paying them money for the kidney?
Well, I think there is a difference. Yeah. One of them, paying for the childcare cost, is basically making sure that they are not losing. Because if you have to pay, $1,000 in childcare while you go off to another state to donate a kidney, you are essentially paying to donate a kidney. And so it's like removing a disincentive rather than providing an incentive. And I do think there's an important difference there.
Do you think that your story has helped others to make a decision to donate their kidneys or just help other people in general?
I hope it does. And I think there's some ways that it has. After I did this, I was very interested in kind of publicizing it. Not because I want to puff my own chest a lot, but because I've kind of become convinced this is a thing more people should do. I talked at the beginning of the podcast about how I became convinced it was good and like I wanted to do it, but that extends out to the rest of the world. I want to convince more people that this is good because people are dying. Tens of thousands of people die every year in America because we don't have kidneys for them. And, there are more than, I think at this point, around 100,000 people on the kidney wait list. Most of them will not get a kidney. Most of them are on dialysis right now. And when you're on dialysis, that life is terrible and it sucks. It sucks hardcore and you're probably going to die. And like, I hate to be very grim about it, but I think something like 25% or 30% of people who go on dialysis die within the first year. And the survival rate at 5 years is only like 33%. So by 5 years, 2/3 of people on dialysis have died. And dialysis saps all of your energy. You have to go for 3 to 4 hours, 3 to 4 times a week. And every single time it like robs you of all your energy. You feel like crap afterwards. It's becomes extremely difficult, if not impossible, to hold down a normal job, to do all your normal hobbies, to have a normal life, because, for 16 to 20 hours a week, you might be, like a zombie in the dialysis center. And it can be fixed for almost everybody who's on dialysis. There's a few people who can't benefit from a transplant. Like if you're very, very old or very, very sick, you might not be eligible for a transplant. But the vast majority of people could be helped if they had a new kidney. So I kind of became convinced by this, and I want to publicize, this message basically. So I kind of started, I don't know if promoting it is the right word to say, but I want to inspire people. I did an Ask Me Anything on Reddit, and that was pretty successful. I think it got upvoted a lot and it got a lot of attention. And I think I included a link to Waitlist Zero and their website. And a couple days after I had put that post on Reddit, Josh Morrison from Waitlist Zero had got in touch with me, and he said, "We've had 100 people in the last 2 days, come through and fill out our questionnaire. Like we want to know more." So, part of the reason I like doing interviews about this is to potentially inspire people to consider this because I want more people to do it. More people should do it, and we could save a lot of people's lives if that was the case.
Have you been given any closure as to who received your kidney?
Yes, I was actually. So I donated anonymously. So they asked me during this process, if the person, if it was possible, would you want to be in touch with them? And my thought was kind of like, sure, I don't need to be. It
Mhm.
wasn't why I did it. But if they wanted to be in touch with me, then I was like, sure, that'd be fine. But because I'm donating anonymously, it was basically their choice. They got to decide whether or not they wanted to be in touch. And if they didn't want to be in touch, there was just nothing I could do about it. The only thing I knew was that I knew that my kidney was going to Johns Hopkins Hospital down in Baltimore. And I knew that they had described my recipient as a young person. And that was basically all I knew pre-surgery. So, I went through with the surgery. And I think a week or two after the surgery, I basically got it might have been 2 weeks to a month. I'm not sure.
Mhm.
But a little while after the surgery, I got a letter from the hospital that they had transferred from the recipient. And it was just a letter saying, thank you so much. And, we're doing very well. It was kind of the recipient and his wife. And if you ever want to get in contact, here's our contact information. So we did end up getting in contact eventually, and we kind of talked, and it was really cool. So yeah, I did get to meet my recipient. He's a young guy, married guy in his 20s. I think he had basically just been born with kidney problems and had gotten his first transplant when he was 5. His kidneys were failing basically from birth, and he was just going to die. There was no future for him, but he hung on for a few years, and he got his first transplant at like 4 or 5 years old. And he lived with that set of kidneys for like 20 years, and then they failed. I think that's pretty typical. I think 20 years is about on average how long a donated kidney will last. So yeah, his donated kidney failed in his mid-20s, and he needed another one, and he spent a year on dialysis, and then he got mine, and so now he's doing great.
Wow, that's awesome. Do you ever feel reassured knowing that you made a difference in his life?
It's funny. I do feel reassured, but I felt that way beforehand. I had convinced myself that this was the right thing to do, the moral thing to do. This is a good thing to do, like months ago, before I had ever donated and before I had met him. So I had already kind of come to peace with like, I'm doing good in the world. And I'm not a perfect person. But this is a good thing that I can do. This will be a good one, in my cosmic list of all the good things and bad things that I've done. I know I can put this one on the good side. So I had come to peace with that well before actually meeting him. But meeting him was also very cool.
Okay. And Jeremiah, do you have any final words you would like to say for the audience to hear?
Well, I talked about how I kind of like to encourage people to do this. So, if anybody's curious, I would encourage you to look into it. For me, it took many, many instances of kind of thinking about it before I wanted to make the leap and actually really check it out. I had to read a book. I had to read about Dylan Matthews at Vox and how he did it. I had to watch a bunch of YouTube videos. But if you are kind of in that curious stage, you can send an email to waitlistzero.com, or you can go to their website at waitlist0. And basically, Waitlist Zero has a form where you can just fill out some very basic information, and they will have someone get in contact with you. They will have a person who has already donated get in contact with you and answer any questions you might have. So if it's something you're curious about, definitely take that first step. It's very easy and free to just fill out their form, and they'll call you and talk about it. And maybe it'll be right for you, maybe it won't. But I'd encourage anybody who's intrigued by this episode to go to Waitlist Zero and check it out a little bit.
Okay, I just wanted to thank you so much, Jeremiah, for talking to me today and sharing your experiences.
Well, I'm glad to be here and happy to be talking about it.
Thank you for listening to Imagine All the People podcast. This was Jeremiah, and we hope that you will join us for the next episode.